premiere for BAFTA at the Sirius premiere, and it was just over here at Piccadilly, I think. Big thank you to Mark Woodgate. We wouldn't be here without Mark. Thank you, Mark. And also to Wendy and Layla and the other volunteers who are here, but yeah, helping get everyone in and seated. It is completely sold out, so there may be some people coming in late, so they'll be filling in seats. This is also a live webinar. It's going worldwide, so at the end there'll be a chance for some questions and answers, and for people to briefly ask questions. But I really want to thank everyone for supporting this tonight and coming out. We didn't know how many people would want to come out in the middle of the week like this, but I was in Europe doing a CE5 training expedition in Portugal, which I'm just fresh off the farm in Portugal. We were on a farm actually, and it was beautiful, and I'll maybe have time to share some of what happened during that expedition. And we did a similar presentation to this, but not live webinar in Lisbon, with wonderful people there, and some people who were in the military there came and shared their stories of some encounters with us with these ET spacecraft. So, it's a wonderful opportunity here in London, by the way, for you guys to organize around contact groups in CE5, the Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind Initiative, and also disclosure efforts. Because the two powerhouses on the secrecy of this whole subject are, in descending order, number 1, United States, number 2, Great Britain, number 3, everyone else. And you're seeing a document up here I'm going to talk about in some length of what has happened over the last 7 or 8 years with the French Ministry of Defense. And the irony of being the head of the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence and the founder of the Global Disclosure Movement is that since that date, I've been sitting on the most important government document in the history of the UFO subject, but didn't feel I could share it because I didn't want to burn bridges to the Sarkozy regime and the Ministry of Defense officials working with the French government at that time. I feel at this point enough water has passed under the bridge that I can share it, so that's why I'm sharing it here in London and worldwide, and soon it will be up on our website. The key thing to understand is that there's two things going on with the projects that we founded 25 years ago this month. In fact, this is the 25th anniversary of the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence. And it started as an effort to organize people, a citizens' diplomacy effort, to end sort of the hegemony of covert programs on the issue and let the average person make contact and be the face of humanity instead of a bunch of petro-Nazis and militarists and warmongers and misanthropic money whores. Other than that, I have no opinion about the subject. And but the whole impetus was the concept of transdimensional physics and the interface between consciousness and non-locality in physics, what Einstein called the spooky theory. All right, we'll get into this a little bit later. And so, by 1991, 92, we'd gone to Belgium and had some amazing close encounters of the fifth kind, which is when humans initiate contact and these interstellar vehicles and people show up. And then we went down to Florida and had a group of about 50, 60 people just for a weekend. And as you've all seen in the film Sirius, there were these 4 ET craft that just materialized in the sky. That's the videotape when the guy with the very deep southern accent is going, "Holy damn hot shit!" Yeah. I questioned whether I should edit that out of the documentary Sirius, but I just said, no, that's cool, it's authentic, it's cinema verite, so let's leave it in. And so from then on, what happened is that the intelligence community took note of what we were doing. The Disclosure Project was an outgrowth of Project Starlight, which, as many of you may know, was the initiative that I started that then Lawrence Rockefeller played a support role in, not a primary role in, to brief the Clinton administration, etc. In December of 1993, independent from anything Lawrence Rockefeller wanted to do, I was asked to brief the sitting director of the CIA in the United States. My wife, who is here, Emily, thank you. Emily, by the way, we definitely wouldn't be here without my wife, Emily. Thank you, Emily. Yeah, we just had our 36th anniversary. Yeah, I know. Cool. But the people, you know, who started this project with me, we never thought it would be of that much interest to the government because it was really a citizens' effort. But by the time President Clinton got elected and was in office, the folks who were his senior national security advisors in Inner Circle had been contacted by people following my work and said, you know, this is really happening. And they knew in the intelligence community that we had figured out the Rosetta Stone of contact, meaning non-locality in consciousness, coherent thought, like laser is a coherent light. We're going to talk about this. And transdimensional physics, how interstellar systems interface with coherent thought. Recently, Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook said his next thing he wants to work on is how to actuate the technologies with thought. So a lot of people are picking up on this concept 25 years later. But if you're dealing with interstellar civilizations, they figured this all out a few thousand years ago, a few million years ago, maybe 10 million years ago. And the universe is 14 billion years old, so who knows how long ago some of these civilizations have figured out these technologies. All I can say is they work. And they work because, as I shared with the CIA director's wife at dinner, you can't get there from here, as we say in Maine. You cannot communicate using the speed of light across interstellar distances. You have to drop out of 3D, 4D, go into transdimensional physics, and if you go into these other dimensions, you're interfacing with the realm of thought, consciousness, thought forms, etc., and so on very quickly. So all of these civilizations have figured that out. And in a way, it was a shocking concept 25 years ago, except if you looked at the research, there were a lot of people who were doing things with DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Project Administration, Stanford Research International, doing remote viewing, people like Ingo Swann, who is a friend of mine, some of you may have heard the name, David Morehouse, others. And what they found was that, in fact, those systems work, and Dr. Bob John, J-A-H-M at Princeton, a professor of engineering, found that actually if you put your awareness on a random number generation, you can shift, whether it's putting out zeros or ones. And that if two people who love each other or are united do it, it's an exponential increase. And this has been reproducible over and over and over again in many scientific models, even though it flies in the face of the conventional reductionist linear 3-4D model. So in the upper echelons, or I should say deeper echelons, of the intelligence community and military and also academia, this is really well understood. It's only the mainstream media and sort of the mediocre academics and mediocre government people who don't understand this. But the exceptional folks do. So when we started experimenting with this, and boom, it immediately got on the radar scope of the intelligence community, much to my chagrin. And we were approached by some folks who first threatened me, and I told them under no uncertain terms I cannot be threatened or bought off or intimidated. I basically said, go away. But they persisted, and what we have found is that whatever we have tried to do for disclosure and contact, there's a countermeasure that gets created by the intelligence community. And this is true at the level of presidential intelligence and even folks who direct, you know, your government and MI5, MI6, your Ministry of Defense head. And as you all know, Lord Hill Norton, everybody familiar with Lord Hill Norton? He'd been your MOD head years ago. And when I was at his cottage here in Hampshire, he says, you know, the whole time that I was head of the Ministry of Defense, and of course MI5 and MI6 by extension, you don't have a separate CIA director type person, I was never told anything about this. I only found out about this after the fact. And he was very upset about it. And most people would assume someone at that level of your intelligence community or your Ministry of Defense, you know, major G7 country, group of 7 country, top economy in the world, would be knowledgeable and would be pulled into the briefings on this subject. But they are not. And the same is true in the United States, for the most part. Now, people say, well, why is it that some CIA directors have known and others haven't? And some MOD folks have known and others haven't. And I always point out, it has nothing to do with your rank. Nothing to do with your position. Nothing to do whether you're a doctor, a PhD, an MD, and in this case also an admiral in the Ministry of Defense. It's all based on whether you are going to go along with the agenda. No, not the alien agenda. The agenda of secrecy. Because this subject, as you all know, once disclosed properly and in a hopeful and productive way, would leave no aspect of life on this planet unchanged. Up to and including the complete rearrangement of our macroeconomic system, our energy system, political system, social system, and ultimately major religious systems and thought. That, of course, is enough to keep the brakes on anything. Because as a very interesting guy at the Jet Propulsion Labs once told me, he said, you know, he was talking about these obelisks and other objects on the moon, on Mars, and some of the other structures out there, which do exist, by the way. And Buzz Aldrin even recently called for going back to Mars to investigate them, right? You may not know that, he did. And, but this guy at JPL said, you know, we can't disclose that to the public. I said, why not? It's old stuff. These are old structures, millions of years old. This is not something a few thousand years old. He said because it would show the ancient connection between other civilizations and the development of intelligent life on Earth, and that would collapse the foundations of every fundamentalist orthodox belief system of every religion on Earth. I said, well, good. He says, no, you don't understand. There's a lot of power there. This big of a change they do not want to see happen. All right? So you have that aspect of it. Let's call it the paradigm shift on a deep philosophical, spiritual level. Then you have the shift that would be on the level of the macroeconomic system, which the system of, look, these lights and everything here is running off of 1940s atomic power, if you have a nuclear power plant, or late 1800s fossil fuels, right? So we basically have a civilization that its entire system is running on a 70 to a 120-year-old paradigm of energy and a macroeconomic system that goes with it. So if you change that, you have to be prepared for the biggest change in the history of the human race. I estimate that everything that is from the Industrial Revolution in the early 1800s to now would be eclipsed by an order of magnitude, tenfold greater, within 20 years of the disclosure of this information and the technologies that are attendant to it, that pull energy out of the zero-point energy field and allow for the Z-plane of travel, levitation, boom. So there it is. Peter Thiel, one of the co-founders of the PayPal with Elon Musk, who now has, as you know, the Tesla Motors, said recently in an interview on CNN, basically there have been no technological developments in 50, 60 years of any consequence. It still takes you the same amount of time to go from JFK to Heathrow now as it did in 1964 on a Boeing 707 instead of the Airbus 380. Same thing. And so when you look at that, this is always a shocker to people who say, I'm working the high-tech industry. I said, we don't have any high-tech industry on planet Earth. And as Michio Kaku points out, we're not even a level 1 civilization. We're a level 0. Level 1 is you're living peacefully and not cannibalizing your biosphere and has sustainable energy systems that don't damage the environment. That's level 1. So we're level 0. Now our group is going out, initiating contact with civilizations that are at level 300. Get it? Okay, so it's so there is a bit of a gap. We have some splaining to do, but actually that gap can be closed very quickly once people stop lying about this issue. And this is why the intelligence community became so interested. And it wasn't because of the concept of disclosure per se. It was the vision of interplanetary contact, interstellar contact. And that's why the French Ministry of Defense contacted us. Just the same reason that the intelligence community in the United States did so. They were extremely interested in how is contact made. And they vowed to embark on a long-term journey to do just that, for peaceful purposes. This is why this is, we'll go through this in a moment, this is the most important document ever written from a government entity. And the attachment is even more astonishing, which is an attachment of all the protocols to be used as contact is made and how it's evaluated, with the full resources of the Ministry of Defense of France. Why is that important? Because it's a baby step of a major country doing something that should have happened in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, had there not been a complete subversion by covert military interests, which Eisenhower, the President of the United States, and a five-star general warned us about. And also Lord Hill Norton, a five-star admiral, a Sea Lord, said that he came to realize that our entire civilization is really at risk, not from the UFOs or the ETs, but from the secrecy. The first director of the CIA, Admiral Roscoe Hillenkoetter, the first CIA director, I have a letter that's up on our website, SiriusDisclosure.com, S-I-R-I-U-S, disclosure.com, that is from him, where he states that the secrecy attending this issue is a grave threat because the folks who have created the secrecy do not have the best interests of the United States or the United Kingdom or of humanity in interest. They have the most venal interest at heart, and that is global control and domination through a centralized macroeconomic system where pretty much most folks don't realize this. You know, we think we abolished slavery in the mid-1800s. We didn't. It's just the American plantation is a little nicer than the one in the Congo. But there is a masters and slaves mentality amongst the uber elites that control hundreds of trillions of dollars worth of assets that require a centralized petrodollar system and a centralized energy system, which has been an obsolete paradigm for well on 100 years now. So this information coming out isn't just about are we alone in the universe or not. Most conventional astrophysicists agree that we're not. Now, where they disagree is that they would have the ability to get to Earth, because being the egomaniacs most academics are, and scientists in general, with all due respect to any scientists here, every generation thinks that they know everything. So they can't imagine there'd be a civilization so far advanced beyond us that they could get from 4 or 5 million light years away to here. But that's exactly, I'm going to show you a picture later of an interstellar ambassador who did just that from the Andromeda Galaxy. And so I'm going to show you the most important document and also the most important picture in the history of the UFO subject and how that happened tonight. Now, all of that brings up this question of, if the governments of the world don't do this, then the people should. And that's what I concluded in the 1990s, that the people lead, the leaders will have to follow eventually. But it isn't going to be through passivity. You're going to have to organize your own contact teams, which Mark here in England has done and gone out. You're going to have to organize your own disclosure witnesses who are deep whistleblowers in your Ministry of Defense and MI5 and MI6. And you're going to have to encourage the government to try to begin to catch up with what the French are doing, and which a government I cannot discuss because it's a negotiation and process is about to launch on, but it's one of the most important countries in the world, not American or UK or French. You can go guess. There are a few. So, and also they're wanting to push hard on bringing out the technologies. Now, we hope their prime minister doesn't get assassinated trying. But, you know, and believe me, the threats that I get on a weekly basis in my project is, you know, amazing. But these people in governmental positions need to take the responsibility, and you need to hold their feet to the fire if they don't. And then take matters into your own hands. By the way, isn't there a bloke named Gary McKinnon or something like that here in the UK? After the Disclosure Project events in 2001, this young lad decided he'd start digging into this subject and hacked into some computers. And he got prosecuted. They tried to extradite him to the United States. I reached out to his attorney and said, look, you're arguing this all on the wrong merits. All on the wrong merits. Anybody in here who's a whistleblower, listen, and everyone online listening, I know there are people listening in these divisions, classified above top secret, unacknowledged projects, are listening to this. Do not buy into the legality of the national security orders and oaths related to this subject. They're all null and void. We vitiated them back in 1998. They were completely vitiated because we were able to prove that both in your country and in the United States, the president, the director of the CIA, the top people at the Pentagon and the intelligence, the J2, head of intelligence, Joint Chiefs of Staff, the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, which is as big as the CIA, but is its own in-house thing at the Pentagon, all of whom I personally briefed, every single one of them to a man, and including your Lord Hill Norton, had been denied access to these projects. A priori, the projects are unconstitutional and they're illegal. And if they're illegal, the rule of law does not pertain to the operations attending thereto. Got it? Therefore, anyone who wishes to step forward, documents, materiel, biologicals, technologies, they are free to do so without penalty of law, because the operations themselves are illegal. Now, when I got threatened in 1991, 92, 93 by some folks from the agency and the FBI doing what I was doing, I said, really? Come put on the bracelets. You want to get on the dance floor? Let's get on the dance floor right fucking now. Excuse my French. Because I will clean your clock if this goes to trial and you try to put me in prison, because I will be able to then hit subpoenas to this CIA director I briefed, and to these generals, and to these admirals, and to your MOD head. And when they testify that we don't know anything about these projects, they're unacknowledged special access projects which are illegal, I'm going to have you point, set, match. So just stay out of my way. And they did, because I haven't been imprisoned. And I put on the street many, many top secret documents. Now, that's what Gary McKinnon's lawyer should have argued. He argued all the wrong things, completely untutored on what the constitutional theories are for the Disclosure Project. Does this make sense? Now, when we went from Project Starlight, which was the initiative, and the documents are up on our website. By the way, the AP sued, the Associated Press sued the Clinton Library to get them released. And they are released officially. Signed by myself and a bunch of cosmonauts and astronauts and former KGB people, people from all over the world, saying, lead this effort to end the secrecy, et cetera, and so on. When I realized that the president wouldn't act, and the Congress wouldn't act, then I said, then we're going to act. That's how the Disclosure Project happened. It was the default position. The first was offered to our leaders, including your own. And by the way, there's a guy named Nick Pope who used to be with the Ministry of Defense. When we had the Alton Barnes event, where there was an interstellar vehicle that materialized in the field and was floating towards us at the wee hours of the morning, keep the bad guys away from us, including radar systems, air support, naval support, ground forces, special forces. And that's what I requested. And they said, fine, we'll do it. And what ended up happening is that they were gathering information on what was really going on the subject in the United States, and to an extent, indirectly, in the UK. And they found out, of course, something that they didn't think was possible, because it sounds like a bad John le Carre novel or a conspiracy theory. And I wrote to them and then had some phone calls and said, look, what you have to understand is that in the United States, between, and this was back then, 100 and 200 billion US dollars a year go unaccounted for in the Department of Defense and intelligence community. No one even knows where it's going. As you know from the film Serious, Donald Rumsfeld himself, no flaming liberal, he said there was $2.3 trillion unaccounted for in the Department of Defense budget. Now the estimates are around $8.5 trillion, 14 years later after 9/11. Trillion. So the bottom line is America, the United States of America, loses and can account for more money each year than the entire Eurozone and Great Britain together's military budgets. And actually more than the budget of China, which just hit $110 billion this year, which is a rounding error in the United States. I mean, nobody notices. 110 billion, nobody notices that at all. Our budget is $5 trillion in the United States government. So that's the problem. It is such a corrupt morass. And I'm a proud American. My mother's family were, I'm sorry to say this in London, some of the original founders of the United States fighting the British, but we love you now. But God bless all. But she used to go on and on about that, because in America you have these old dowagers who are daughters of the American Revolution, and they're very crudmudgeons. And my dad is half Cherokee Indian, Native Americans, and he says, "What the hell, woman? My people are waiting for the Mayflower to get here." And I said, "Touche." But that's, when you look at that kind of spending that is unaccounted for, and it isn't as if the president has access to those projects, or your prime minister, for the component that is going on in the United Kingdom, or most ministers of defense and most CIA directors. But some do and some don't. And the ones who do, is because they came up through the ranks and they did what I call a soul biopsy. I'm a trauma doctor, so I use medical analogies. So, if you want to take a biopsy of something to look at it, so they do an analysis of the person's values, beliefs, and ultimately it's whether they'll go along with the agenda of secrecy and criminality. Because when I presented this situation to your former Minister of Defense, Lord Hill Norton, and I'm sitting at his cottage, and he's this old guy, steely blue eyes, and I explained, he said, "Why wouldn't they have told me?" And he was hurt, and a bit peeved, actually, mad, and his pride was hurt. I mean, imagine being in that position and being kept in the dark about the biggest secret in history. And he knew by then it was all true. And I said, "Well, let me answer your question with a question. What would you have done if you had found out there was an illegal, super secret, unacknowledged special access project, transnational, not international, transnational, transects geopolitical boundaries, that is sitting on the technologies that would give us a new civilization without poverty or pollution, that they have enforced the secrecy through murder, mayhem, lies, deception, and intimidation, up to and including high officials in governments, both governments, including your government." He said, "I wouldn't have stood for it for a bloody minute." And he was just like in a lather. And I said, "That's why they didn't tell you." They didn't tell you. So if you're someone who is fundamentally an honest and good person, they're not going to read you into this. That's military speak for brief you. They're not going to get read into a project like this. So when I began to explain how utterly, completely dysfunctional the American military, industrial, laboratory, corporate, financial system is, and how deep black it actually operates. Anything important almost never is brought to the attention of the President of the United States. And I can say this with in real solid authority, or your Prime Minister, Cameron Brown. Isn't that who he is? Yeah. For now. So those are placeholders. It's a little bit like the Truman Show. Everybody see the movie in the Truman Show? You have people who are, it's sort of the thing with Jim Carrey where he's living this world and it all ends up to be a set and it's all fake. I don't know. It's a great movie to look. It's a great, interesting parallel to this. And so the Truman Show is pretty much what our normal political system is, including most of the good people who are in your Ministry of Defense, intelligence community, politicians, etc. It's an extremely tightly compartmented operation. It's very well funded. The other part to understand is nothing important of any strategic significance is above the surface of the Earth. If it's above ground level, it's not really that important. It's fungible, replaceable. Everything critical is underground bases, all throughout the United States, Australia, Pine Gap, and also here in the UK. So anything that is critically important is not sitting above ground. You're not going to see it with a spy satellite, you're not going to see it from an aircraft, and access is multiple levels of entry. I've been in a couple places like this. So that's basically how it's managed. Super secret, illegally, and they tell the people they think they can manipulate. But they will tell certain people a little bit of information if they think they can manipulate them by giving them a little piece of it, usually a distorted piece. We had a president named Reagan, who put all this effort into the SDI, Star Wars initiative, which is really a cover story for putting platforms in space targeting interstellar vehicles, which is what we're doing. It really had nothing to do with brilliant pebbles. That was all just a cover story. The real money was going into interstellar targeting and tracking of these ET craft and shooting them down, which we've been doing for a very long time. And they told him just enough information in a xenophobic way, in a way that was scary, to get his cooperation with that project. And that's why at the UN, if you Google it, you'll see that Reagan said, wouldn't our job of creating world unity and peace be easier if we had a common alien threat to unite against? Very familiar theme. Douglas MacArthur in 1950s, his last address to the Congress, said World War III will be interplanetary. This has been planned since I was 1 year old. I just turned 60 in June. Still bench 410. Anyway, but I know, I'm very eccentric about my workouts. But that's the problem, is that this secrecy has to do with another whole issue, and that is creating the psychological propaganda and the juggernaut so that people will accept the cost of the next level of militarizing the planet. Going from, and actually Wernher von Braun said, it would go from the Cold War to nations of concern, rogue states, to global terrorism. This was all in the disclosure stuff before 9/11. And then objects in space that could be a threat. You hear all this stuff about asteroids and stuff, to playing the final card, the alien threat, of which there is none. But it'd be great if people could be convinced there is, because they could support then, instead of $1 trillion a year coming into the military system, it could be 5 trillion or 6 trillion or 8 trillion, because the whole world, like the movie Independence Day, would unite. Let's kick alien butt! You see? It's jingoism of the worst kind of propaganda and brainwashing, which 99.9% of people who study the UFO subject have been completely infected with. And that creates its own problem, because ultimately, if you're going to have the public approach this subject in a way that's going to be helpful, it doesn't help to trade humans fighting with each other like murderous monkeys that we have for thousands of years, to starting to fight within other planetary systems. This is not progress. So progress requires a more universal outlook based in the concepts of cosmic awareness and universal peace. It cannot break down into, oh, well, yes, we're not alone in the universe, but by the way, there's some out here we need to be fighting. Why? Because if we do that, it's the end of the world, period. It really is. You're talking about weapon systems that are scalar electromagnetic systems that go beyond the speed of light. You know what a scalar is? Or longitudinal? Everybody know what this is? I'm going too far too fast? Well, a quick course in it. The light you see in this room has a wave component, right? And it's 186,000 miles per second. That's how it travels. A longitudinal scalar is not a wave, but longitudinal in a point, and it's at multiples of the speed of light. You weaponize that, you got something. And the United States has weaponized it. So that's the systems that they're using to track, target interstellars as they come through the crossing point of light, step down from other dimensions into this dimension, hit it, boom, down they go. You hear of all these crash retrievals that have happened over the year, that's how they've happened. And I know exactly what the technologies are. I know men who've worked on the systems and operated them, much to their regret. And this then requires some people in governments and the grassroots to say, let's find a better way of making contact. Let's not recreate the mistakes of the last few thousand years, because a new era has opened, the hallmark of which is universal peace, not interstellar war. As great as that is for selling Hollywood movies, it's a very short future. Timeline, boom, stop. Right? Because we're not talking about these. You weaponize this kind of information and technology, it makes a hydrogen bomb look like a tinker toy. So we have got to understand that the existential crisis we have is really in consciousness and our social and spiritual development. But that has to be then applied into our policy. And what's beautiful about this is that even after explaining all this to the Ministry of Defense officials and their Air Force folks and intelligence officials in France, well, the first thing they said was, this is fantastic and terrible, when I explained the nature of secrecy in the United States, United Kingdom, and many other countries. And they said, well, I don't know how much we can do, we'll do what we can. As soon as they faxed me information about what they wanted to do with our team to go and make contact, they got a call. Their ambassador from France to the United States got a rather nasty call, irate, and said, what the hell do you think you're doing? And the ambassador from France to the United States said, well, we're planning to initiate this research project, but also a peaceful rapprochement with these interstellar visitors in a scientific but a visionary way, and we're cooperating with Dr. Greer and his team to do so. And the intelligence folks in the U.S. on the other side said, just stay away from any U.S. assets in any U.S. territory. And the guy said, look, it'll be on French soil, so bug off. And that's how that conversation went. But so there were all manner of delays, which when you see the translation of this letter, you'll see it, the Admiral Morin is apologizing for the delays because there's all this interference going on. You don't step onto this stage without, I mean, you're going to, you know, anyway, you're going to have the whole thing coming at you like a freight train, which we have. But the French stayed true to their purpose, and we eventually did a fantastic CE5, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind event. Now, was anyone there in France in 2010 or 11? Yeah? Most people don't know that they were there to be trained, but it was actually an event for the Admiral and the Ministry of Defense. So they piggybacked their, is this disturbing or interesting? I don't know which. Well, this is the way I have to do things. They wanted to be discreet. So they piggybacked their Admiral and their systems on a public CE5. And of course they were there sitting in plaid shirts and looked like just regular Frenchmen. But the whole area, we were on a 2,200 acre estate, was cordoned off. And you'll see a photograph from a trans-dimensional ET vehicle that blipped in and blipped out very quickly there. But they tracked objects going over the site in excess of 200,000 kilometers an hour. And all kinds of phenomena in the field, weird things like something you see on Close Encounters of the Third Kind. You know, we had the cars parked in a hayfield and some interstellar trans-dimensional energy form went up and down the cars and turned the lights on and off, did all kinds of strange things. So they were very, very pleased with that. And so then they've sort of gone on from there. But the idea, just the idea that a Ministry of Defense official at this level, very senior admiral, and his team, working at the highest levels of the French government, would say, we want to pursue interstellar and intergalactic contact for peaceful purposes. This is huge news. This is an enormous development. The superlatives really can't reach it, just the idea that they'd go this far, and that they try it, and that they came, and that there's still operations going on, but they're keeping very quiet about it. Part of it is that there are elements of this so-called majestic group, MJ12. It's actually the Majority Committee on Intelligence. That's really what it stands for. That was founded decades ago. Have representation in France and also in French industry, and there's been a lot of pressure to cease and desist in France, as there would be against anyone in your government who initiated it. But at a certain point, can't we get together behind these folks and say, we're going to do it, and we're not going to be intimidated, and we're not going to be stopped, because it's time for us to go into this future that is peaceful and universal, and allow the public to know in an open CE5 event. This demonstration event in France was just a demonstration event for them. But eventually I see in the future, and I've had very lucid dreams of the future, where there's absolutely open contact with the full cooperation of governments and the military around the world, where they realize what a mistake they made making this secret, and what a mistake they've made creating an adversarial dynamic between humans and these interstellar civilizations. So I see that happening, and this was the first major crack in that wall of not only silence, but of stupidity. The stupidity of a militaristic approach to something that should never have been militarized. Never should have been militarized. And, you know, there's a senator in America named Barry Goldwater, who's passed away. He was ran for president in 1964, and I was at his home in Arizona some years ago, and he had left the Senate. John McCain, the Senator McCain who ran for president against Obama in 2008, he took his seat. And I was at his home, and he said to me, you know, he had found out about this information because he was a general in the Air Force Reserves and had been on every committee, you know, Intelligence Committee of the Senate, Armed Services. He says, but I never got anything official about it. I only found out about from pilots and whatnot. I said, yeah, of course, they're not going to tell you at the Senate Intelligence Committee. They're never going to brief you on this. And, you know, and he looked at me, you know, and he just said, you know, what do you want to do? I said, I need your help to bring this information out. And he says, yes, you're right, it's time. He says it was a goddamn mistake then and a goddamn mistake now that this was ever made secret. And I'm sitting in his living room. Very interesting. This is a right-wing conservative Republican saying this, and a military guy. So I said, well, what can you do to help? He says, I don't know. I said, who do you know? He says, well, I know everybody. I said, okay, so I started going through some names of current members of this committee, the Majority Intelligence Committee on Interstellar Matters, MAGIC, M-A-J-I-C. And I got to one name, and he knew the name. And it was Admiral Bobby Ray Inman. And Admiral Inman had been head of the National Security Agency, and before that, one of the deputy directors of CIA. But he left the government and got onto the board of Science Applications International Corporation, SAIC, which is one of the crown jewels of the contracting business dealing with anti-gravity and ET and UFO issues in La Jolla, California. And he says, oh, I know Bobby Ray. We've been friends for years. I said, well, give him a call, would you? So he did. I got a call from him later. He says, I can't make any more phone calls like that for you. He says, they read him the Riot Act. And Admiral Inman was made very clear, stay off of this if you know what's good for you and your family. So Goldwater tried to help us, got kind of shut down. Admiral Bill Colby, the CI director under Ford, was going to give us a 0-point free energy device and some just starter seed money of around $50 million to get it out to the public as an open source system. The week he was going to meet with a member of my board of directors, they found him floating down the Potomac River. Yeah, that's what happened to Bill Colby. So there's been a lot of sacrifice to get us this far. And so I think people have to understand that at a certain point, you've got to pull the folks together and have a mass movement to do it within government, but also with the public. And that's what we're working to do, to make contact, to effect disclosure, and to bring out these technologies, all three. You can't do one without the other. And by the way, that's why the subject in general is secret. Everyone says, well, couldn't they bring out the medical healing technologies? I said, no, because the physics behind transdimensional healing energetically is the same that would run your house without a power bill and use of petrol. Well, can't they just disclose that the ETs are here? I said, yeah, no. If they disclose that the ETs are real and they're here, or even those old objects on Mars, aside from collapsing the fundamentalist belief systems of people who think we rode dinosaurs like the Flintstones, you know, that's 25% of Americans believe that, by the way. No, that's a true statistic. You know how you're riding the dinosaurs like that? They have a museum in Kentucky, $27 million, where they teach children that this is actually our history. Ideas so untutored it beggars the imagination. But anyway, everyone's free to their belief, and and they're sincere, but they're sincerely wrong. And so this then, becomes, all this has to come together. And even if you acknowledge that there's intelligent life out there that has managed to get here, the very first question any astute scientist is going to ask is, how did they get here? When that question is asked, it shall be answered. When it's answered, it's the end of the world as we know it, like the REM song, but I feel fine. All right? Because there goes oil, there goes gas, there goes all your public utilities, transmission lines, nuclear power, internal combustion engines in the boot of your car, not the boot, the bonnet of your car, you call it, or boot if it's some cars. Jet engines, obsolete. 1930s technologies. Rockets, 1940s. Everything changes. Everything changes. It's huge. So that is what they're forestalling. And by the way, one of the reasons why most public officials won't act on this is because they don't want to manage the change. I had a very interesting this is why this is such an act of courage, amazing courage by the French. God bless them. Because an admiral in the United States who is head of CONUS, Continental United States Security, very powerful guy, he said to us, my team, we were meeting with him, and he said, yes, you're absolutely right. This should come out. He says, but my real task is maintaining the status quo and the homeostasis of the global energy supply. That's it. That's why we're in the Middle East. And he says, what you're proposing would be so much change so quickly that no one wants to manage it. I want to retire from this command and go fishing at my ranch in Montana. This is what he said. So a lot of the secrecy is by inertia, it's sort of the banality of evil. It's just not wanting to do it because it's easier not to. However, in the meanwhile, you have 7.2 billion people living on late 19th century technologies, destroying the biosphere, the have and have-nots gap growing, which is a prescription for global revolution and terrorism, by the way, of course. And on top of it, you have a renegade group of unacknowledged special access projects who do not answer to your elected and appointed officials or to mine in America. The real high end of it is the transdimensional physics, the technologies, the ET issue, anti-gravity, wrong word, electromagnetic-gravitic systems, high voltage systems you put over something that can float and zip like that. In 1954, October, there was a man who was on our team, worked with us for many years, he's recently passed away, so I'll mention who he is. Third highest ranking guy at the Naval Research Labs, the largest Department of Defense labs in the United States, named Rick Foch, F-O-C-H. He was in the vault and saw documents where in October of 1954, we had mastered gravity control. So a lot of the things you see zipping around are not interstellar. Many of them are ours. And there's the state-of-the-art research facility at the Lockheed Skunk Works in the high desert of California near the Edwards complex is a subterranean facility called the Cube, C-U-B-E. It's a cube-shaped facility deep underground. It's connected through underground connectors to the Nellis Range, mistakenly called Area 51. No one calls it that in the business, by the way. That's a misnomer. The real action there is at Pahut Mesa, Groom Lake, S4, S9, and S12. Those are the proper names. Blackjack Control and Blackjack Operations. I have a document. It's the first document that was in the Obama briefing that lists the code names and project numbers on there. That's a National Reconnaissance Office document. By the way, NRO, National Reconnaissance, they run all the super secret birds, spy satellites. Amazing stuff that they have. And if you go to their headquarters, it says over the door, "We own the night." And I turned to some people on my team, I said, well, we need to own the light. They can have the darkness, we'll have the light. But that's their motto, we own the night. And you can see anywhere, anytime, through cloud, down to anything you're reading. And you can be talking to a friend on the top of Mount Everest or anywhere else, they'll hear every word you're saying if they want to know it. That is true. Ben Rich said this, there are no private conversations anywhere on Earth, number one. So forget Snowden stuff with, PRISM. I mean, that's like level 1 intel gathering, NSA. It is. It's like, it's not even, because the president knew about it. And so the Senate, if they knew about it, it's like 40-year-old technology. It's true. Absolutely true. Because the real action's in the unacknowledged special access projects. And so when Ben Rich said we can take ET home, as you saw in the movie series, he meant it. So we had master gravity-controlled trans-dimensional systems. Now there's all kinds of conspiracy things. We're not actually allowed to go out there because there's sort of a containment zone around Earth until the rampaging primates make peace. That would be us. And quit clubbing each other over the head over stupidity like ideologies and this ism and that, whatever. We're not allowed to go too far out there. And there is a containment policy. It was lifted for the moon, because we do have facilities there, but no further. I only have a couple hours, so I can't get into all the details of this. I'm trying to give you the big picture. Now, that means, of course, anyone doing this, what I'm going to go through in a moment, is going to be running into the buzzsaw. Anybody read the book Into the Buzzsaw, the foreword by Gore Vidal, about people who journalists who tried to blow the cover off huge stories like this, going through the buzzsaw and being chewed up. Some were killed, some died, some had suicides, some got sick, some fired, whatever. But it's an interesting mainstream media book, actually. And you're going to have to contend with the fact, and this was why I brought all these folks to Washington, and I had them meet with senior people on my team who have been in these unacknowledged special access projects and been with me at briefings. I introduced, there's an astronaut named Edgar Mitchell. I introduced him to all this. I brought him to the Pentagon to brief Admiral Tom Wilson, who is the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So back in the late 90s, 97. So that is all a process that they needed to know before they stepped into this. Now, I wasn't trying to scare them off, although I may have a bit, because it caused a few-year delay. But I wanted them, in medicine we call it informed consent. And I wasn't going to lie when they asked me what kind of security risks would there be to us doing this. I said, well, first of all, the people keeping the secret transnational. They have representations, covert, deep cover in your country. They have technologies like you cannot believe. And they have reconnaissance over France that will know everything you're doing in real time. So nothing will really be done secretly. So that you factor into bake that into the cake from the get-go. And they went, oh, mon Dieu, And I said, yeah, okay, so it doesn't mean we can't do it, but be aware. So it became this cat and mouse thing to set this event up. That apparently there was a woman here who was there, and some other people I know. They had to set up a security perimeter, a radar perimeter, divert air traffic, everything for this event. These 3 nights in the Brittany on a 2,200-acre estate that had been part of a family who, ironically, helped organize the French Revolution, like my mom's family did in America, but who also specifically organized the beheading of Marie Antoinette. Some very interesting vibes at this estate. Anyway, but welcome to my world, a little strange. But anyway, It was beautiful because the events that happened were just magnificent. Even though, you know, it was not known by, there were 60 people there. There were only a dozen or so that knew why we were there. But it was an introduction to them of how to go into the samadhi state, remote view interstellar civilizations, create a coherent thought sequence that results in contact being linked into their electronic systems, ET electronic systems that interface with coherent thought. How to comport oneself when events are taking place, etc., and so on and so forth, as well as what to monitor. And moreover, what the philosophical underpinnings are that lead to successful contact. It cannot be an us versus them military approach, because that leads to nothing but a disaster. And in fact, the last 60 years prove it. Eisenhower did actually meet with ETs at Muroc, M-U-R-O-C, near Edwards, what's now Edwards Air Force Base. I believe it was 54 or 56. I have to look at my documents. And I actually got a letter from someone who was there with Eisenhower at the meeting that was sent to me by the French intelligence. They had it. It was very interesting. I wish a lot of this had made its way into the movie, serious. We're going to do a follow-on documentary if we find the filmmaker who wants to do it. Anybody know a good one? Come to Charlottesville, Virginia, near the University of Virginia. We'll do it within 6 months. So that is, you know, that was something that when they realized that there were all these issues around making contact, but that it could be done if you had the right philosophical perspective, because the ETs are not unwilling to make contact. They're not unwilling to make contact with buffoons or militarists or people who have an antiquated pre-diluvian worldview that anything we don't understand we have to shoot and kill and knock down out of the sky. You see? But these were highly conscious people, very on board with the philosophical underpinnings that are the prerequisite of contact. And that is why I say this was one of the most important initiatives. So let's scroll down, if we can see. I'll get my laser pointer and just point out a few. I know most of you don't read French. I certainly don't. I'm a medical doctor where they say it's equivalent to learning 4 foreign languages. So, not yet, but we'll just so up at the top. Can you see the red pointer? So this is Dr. Pierre Morin, who's an admiral, who's with the Ministry of Defense, urgent, 16 January 2007. It was also copied to a SPARAD, a group that is working with the Ministry of Defense for making contact. It was primarily addressed to me and our host at the estate, Philippe Aubin, and his brother who owned this massive estate in France. So as you scroll down, you'll see the signature and the seal for the Ministry of Defense. Now, if we go to the translation, I'm not going to read through all this. This will be up on the website soon enough. We had someone just recently do a better translation than what we had and that I showed in Lisbon, interestingly, which we'll pull up here in a moment. You'll see that the first parts of it are dealing with sort of an apology for the delay. And the delay is the backstory I was telling you about. They had to gather all this intelligence about what they were facing and what kind of countermeasures they might encounter from the American/British/MAGIC, M-A-J-I-C committee. So that's why the French Ministry of Defense assured its presence for the test attempted contacts beginning the 4th week of this year. They wanted to do it in 2007. It ended up happening, I think, 2010, wasn't it? 2010, my friend who was there. Apology on behalf of the Ministry of Defense for this temporary inconvenience. It's only a temporary delay, and we request all participants to postpone the meeting. The initial CE5 event was going to be in the 20. It's very interesting. It would have been in the summer of 2007. Due to short-term political imperatives, the MOD is obliged to request the participants concerned with the feasibility operation reported the test and contacts be scheduled for the 24th and 25th of this year. This is worded awkwardly, but the actual original is worded awkwardly. The full determination and active collaboration of the MOD at its highest level regarding the entrance of France and its scientific community. And this is an amazing statement. This is addressed to me. By the way, it's not classified, so I can share it. I've just been not sharing it because, again, I wanted to give them time to sort things out. The protocol of reciprocity, meaning with the ETs, of acquired knowledge during the rescheduled experiments of the signing officers in close connection with SPORAD, which is a research group that there's an attached document I'll show you in a moment that's, I don't know, 20 pages long about the protocols. Will supply all necessary means of materials, human resources, and financial support. This protocol will be based on 4 categories of specifications in coordination with the needs and efforts according to your recommendations with the support of the MOD. Identification of the source of the ET UFO object, procedure and recognition, biological, physiochemical, relative fields, and miscellaneous language, laser signaling, and things of this sort. I don't know what MFP means. Quality of the source, to document the quality of the source, biological if possible, in relation with the validation of our entries and contacts made this category critical. Availability of the source, this category regroups the fields regarding the contact possibilities and future exploitation of the above mentioned. The collaboration of the delegation representation of the Ministry of Defense with its full technical backing requires the agreement from each party on the process, analysis, specification, concept, implementation, necessary means for exploring the scientific results. These results must allow us to conclude in a performance evaluation system in the advanced framework of the more action models regarding the objectives brought through your experimental proposition and the electronic and optical means you wish to use that we accept to put in your disposal during your stay in France. So I had sent a very exhaustive list of the material, what we needed to have in place, the security perimeter, the radar monitoring, the air traffic control diversion, on and on and on. I mean, my document is another huge document, which actually ought to be released with this one, shouldn't it? Just thought of that. Make a note, Emily. All right, we'll dig it up out of our archives. The basement of my house is like a very interesting vault. Besides the fact that our imperatives forbid us to take part during the 2 coming weeks, see, we were going to do it in those 2 coming weeks. The request, the means to put at your disposal in absence of all circumstantial recommendations did not allow us to account to our superiors with all the required scientific certainty and to engage a process of long-term exchange on this experimental field with you. What this is trying to say is that the delay was because they couldn't get everyone else on board to do it in 07, so that's why it got pushed to 2010. In the hope of your understanding and respect for our political imperative. So there are a lot of arms being twisted here. You can read between the lines. That will become a certain commitment and our will hereby affirm to proceed on an exhaustive journey with you on this topic. We will be able to erase the disappointment of the postponement of the first contact that was going to happen at the end of this month. That was in January. On behalf of our representative, I'm pleased to wish you all the best for this coming year and outstanding results for our 2 countries. So, of course, I'm American. So, obviously, this was intercepted by the National Security Agency, and that's when the ambassador to the United States from France got this rather nasty contact. So, this is such an amazing sort of paradigm shift that a Ministry of Defense. So, if the French could contemplate doing this at this level, and this was at the highest level, as it said, including political, meaning that the president of France, Sarkozy. Why can't it happen in the UK? Why not? You need to break with the Americans on this. And not with the American government, because the American government would be on board with the secret, illegal, corrupt kleptocracy of petro-Nazis and fascists that are running the world amok. You guys need to get your government to do this. Why not? All right? Help me do this in Great Britain. All right, now we'll show the SPORAD document, which is, we're not going to go through it, I just want you to get a sense of it. It's this very long tome, I don't know how many pages it is, that goes through all the scientific procedures we're going to do, and that they would engage on. So this becomes a template that can be then taken by other governments. So there's another government in the world that I'm in the process of briefing, who are quite interested. And about 2 years ago, almost exactly 2 years ago, I was on an island in off Australia in the Great Barrier Reef with 120 world leaders. I was asked to be the keynote to talk about this stuff. And the Minister of Defense for Australia was all kinds of people. I'd be honest with you, I thought I'd hurl myself off the dock into the Coral Sea by the time I got off that island, just because it was so stressful. You know, anybody ever read the book To Kill a Mockingbird? But what they used to talk about, the hate stares, you know, that the African Americans would get this hate stare. I know that because I had an African American girlfriend in high school, and let me tell you, this was in the South in 1972 and 3. So the fact that I wasn't lynched and killed then is something of a miracle. But the folks who were, I mean, the head of BP was at this meeting. The head, all these folks, I mean, you know, a bunch of folks with big interest in oil, gas. Coal is the only export really Australia has. And I was basically standing up saying, all this is true. There was a physicist there who was collaborating, who was presenting the science behind trans-dimensional electronic systems that pull energy out of the zero-point field, and this in front of 120 of the most powerful people in the world. So there was maybe 20% of them that thought, oh, this is a solution finally to the environmental and da-da-da-da, and the others were looking at me with these hate stares, like, I'm going to kill you. I couldn't get off that island fast enough, let me tell you. It was very stressful. And I couldn't take anybody with me. A security team or anything, so I was just kind of there, you know. And the only way you could get to the island was a private helicopter, which I don't have, or their yacht, the yacht for the island, which was not at my disposal. So I was stuck there for 3 days. It was very interesting 3 days. This is the kind of stuff I have to do. But from that, and from the film Sirius, which, by the way, last month became the #1 documentary on Netflix in North America. It's not available on Netflix in the UK yet, but there are people all over the world getting really excited about what we're doing, is the point. From the French to these other countries. And I think that what we have to understand is that there are two processes. A lot of people ask, you know, when is disclosure going to happen? I said, well, it already did. We did that 14 years ago. The majority of people in the world think UFOs are real and the government's hiding something. Now, what they really mean to ask is, when do you think official disclosure by the governments and the whatever are going to happen? I said, well, that was supposed to happen in 1993 and 94. And that was the indication from the Clinton administration. But it's like when Jimmy Carter wanted to do this in 1976. You know the story? 2 goons with all excess badges went into the private quarters of the White House and said to President Carter, if you would like to complete your first term as president, you will keep your goddamn mouth shut about this. I know for a fact this is what happened. So, look, you know, ultimately it's how courageous are you, and do you have enough people willing to support what you're doing, and are you willing to say, full speed ahead, damn the torpedoes, you know? And I tell people it is about spiritual courage. It doesn't mean we have to go to DEFCON 1 and have war over this. It means we need Defense Condition 1. It means we need to come together and be courageous, spiritual warriors, and have the courage to do the right thing. The lack of courage on this issue, which was, that's why I was so impressed with the French going this far, is why it's secret. It isn't that it can't be done. People aren't courageous enough to stand up to the thugs. But you know what? If Winston Churchill and FDR, Roosevelt, and that generation had that attitude, we'd all be goose-stepping to Adolf Hitler's grandson. Sorry. But we've got to find the courage to do the right thing on this, the most important secret and the most important subject in the history of the human race. Absolutely. And that's really what I think we need to find the leadership for in every country we can. And that's why I continue to work on disclosure efforts while I'm also training people in the public to make contact. Because here's another little fact. I'm one guy. I put my pants on one leg at a time. I'm really just a country doctor from North Carolina, live in Virginia now. But if there are thousands and tens of thousands of people, which is emerging, doing close encounters of the fifth kind in teams, they can track what I'm doing all the time, and they do. But they can't track tens of thousands and millions. They don't have infinite resources. And so by decentralizing this initiative, both for disclosure and contact is the best way for this to happen. So I'm asking people to think about this. It's a big mistake to think that one person or a few people are going to do this. Years ago, a good friend of Bill Clinton's and Hillary Clinton said, "Oh, why are you doing this with the public? Just assemble a few of us elites and, blah, blah." It was this masters of the universe, elitist idea. I said, no. I said, first of all, that won't work. Secondly, they're going to know what we're doing, that our adversaries in magic. Third, if we are not decentralized and we don't have a lot of people doing this, it's too easy to shut it down. But if you disperse it to the public, and that's why on our website, SeriousDisclosure.com, there's an app. You can put it on your phone, turns your phone into a magnetic field meter, has all the remote viewing protocols, everything. It's a little app. There's another app that's free that you can download that will show you where CE5 people are in your community that you can meet up with, like Mark here in London or in Brighton and other places. So all the tools are out there if you go there and drill down on that website, so you can do this yourself. But don't, stop sitting at home eating Cheetos and watching television. Or not Cheetos, chips, or whatever you have. Crisps, I think you call them. I'm learning a little by that. Crisps. You really want to be able to empower yourself to do this. So it's wonderful that the French with Spirad, and this is just a cover, I just wanted to show it to you, this is a draft from '07, and it's gone through another series of refinements. All this will be up on the website soon enough. But I think what you want to see is, how do you do this? And that's where you say, well, if the protocols are understandable and everyone can do it, why don't we do it and bypass the bureaucracy of government? We should. But we're doing both. So we should hope and train governments that are friendly to this and let them experiment with it for peaceful purposes. But the real action, really the real power, is with each of you and with all of us together, because that they cannot stop. And they knew that. That's why I said you squeeze the toothpaste out of the tube fast enough and hard enough, and that was my objective 25 years ago. So lots of people understand what the contact protocols are, why they work, how you practice them, and then go out and start doing it. You'll be pretty amazed at what will happen. Pretty amazed. Now, it may not be what you're expecting, because most people look at too many Hollywood movies and they don't understand what the nature of interstellar contact is, which is the next thing I want to get into. So if we put in the super select, we'll start showing. Yeah, that's right. While he's setting that up, I just want to set the stage of what we do. We go out under the stars. We just came back from Portugal for 7 nights. Beautiful. We had amazing events happen there, beautiful events, huge objects that came over, a number of things I've filmed. Those will be coming out soon. The protocols involve, we send up a very powerful laser signal to give them a vector exactly where we are. We have electronic tones, which were actually recorded out of a crop circle by the BBC. Colin Andrews gave them to us, that we then send out over radio transmissions. And then we have the remote viewing protocol and the coherent thought sequencing I briefly mentioned earlier. And so, I guess let's show this. I want to go through this one first. Bijou. This interstellar ambassador's name is Bijou. We know because he told us. And this is actually his form. He has night vision goggles, a convex forehead, something that looks like a yarmulke on top of his head here. He's in a cone of light, you'll see in a moment. This is the right side of his face. This in the dark is the left side. This is one arm and hand. This is his chest. This is his booties and feet here. Now, what's interesting, look at the size from his nose. You see his nose and eyes, one eye and the other eye's here. And if you look at the cranial vault, as a doctor, the first thing I noticed. So if you looked at the people next to you, the distance from their eyes to the top of their head is this. His is 3 times that. And so we were using some electronic systems, magnetometers, other electronics, and would ask, and I said, your IQ, I'm estimating is in the 400 to 500, maybe 450, and the detector affirmed it. So we do a lot of things with electronic communication that's transdimensional. So let's go to the other one that actually shows the whole picture. And I'll set up the setting of how this happened. And this will happen to you guys also if you form teams. So these images. So this happened about 6 years ago, not quite. We were in the desert in Joshua Tree National Park. And we had taken a break from what we were doing, and I'd walked out east of the field in the desert. So this orb, this is not a star, appeared right beside me, fully materialized. And it followed us back to the group, and then we heard 4 or 5 people talking, but not English or not any earth language, but you couldn't see them. I have military-grade night scope binoculars. Nothing was there. So a member of our team, Raven, had a camera, and she took a picture of the area where the voices were, out in this area. And this orb lights up a bush, and these are blankets or sleeping bags on a chair, because it was very cold. And then there's this strange thing floating outside. Someone said it's like an angel because it has wings. I said, no, that's the transdimensional teleportation energy. So go to the next one, and you'll see. So what happened is that with the naked eye, very little could be seen. But with the digital cameras, but we heard the voices, and this orb was seen. And the orb is actually the containment vessel folded into space-time that has the craft and everyone in it. But if you can imagine, you know what astral projection is? Visualize an electronic system that allows for electronic astral projection, but reproducibly. Too weird? I haven't even started getting weird yet. But that's, let's go to the next image. Oh, I see, it's just doing its, yeah. So then you lighten it a little bit, and you see this guy, and what's interesting is that he actually is floating outside the circle, turns, twists like this, and waves, and has this enigmatic little smile on the face, right here. Now, what was happening in consciousness is another whole story. What was happening with electronics? All the electronics we have, which are laser detectors, microwave, radar, magnetometers, things that pick up the magnetic field change when these objects come in, were all going off in the middle of this 800,000 acre national park. So this is just an example of what can happen, and instead of getting an image of their vehicle, there's an image of one of the ambassadors. We estimate, we went out and measured during the daytime that this gentleman was probably in the 4 to 5 feet tall and was about 3 feet outside the circle that he floated in. Very, very unusual. Now, most people are expecting a fully materialized craft, which we'll show some images, has happened. But 99% of the time, it's something strange. Now, J. Allen Hynek, the astronomer, astrophysicist, said, you coined the term high strangeness. If it's interstellar, it's going to be strange. If it seems prosaic, it's probably man-made. It's probably one of ours. You know, and if you get really up and close to them, you'll see that the light coming from them, they have parts that are discernible parts. Interstellar vehicles aren't, because I'll tell you how they're manufactured. They're manufactured through a sort of like a architectural template that is transdimensional, and then it goes from that more higher frequency dimension into space-time and is materialized. And that's why there are no seams, and their craft and everything about how they communicate and travel is conscious AI, artificial intelligence, and nanobiotechnologies, meaning that the craft itself is conscious with the consciousness of the occupants, and the craft is a living organism. even though it's technological. And if you talk to a couple of the guys who've been at these retrievals of ones that have been downed, when they crash or come down, if they're in this dimension fully, it's like shooting fish in a barrel, unfortunately. When they hit them, and if there's a fissure in them, they'll start trying to close the fissure like a time lapse of someone's skin cut. The skin of the craft starts going. You're not talking about your grandfather's Oldsmobile or Rolls Royce even. So let's go to the next. So that you have to begin to understand what the nature of transdimensional physics and technology is, so you can make a distinction between that and the Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman systems. Because most people conflate one with the other. They don't have enough discernment to know a difference between the two. Can we go to the next? So you can see why I didn't want to do this. Thank you, Mark. See, by now I would have thrown the remote up and say, that's it. Nurse, help. Anyway, doctors are helpless in a lot of ways when it comes to tech. So this just shows that, and the energy field is really quite beautiful. So next. Is this running through a computer?
No, it's just...
It's just really slow. Okay. Okay, now I want to show, I want to show this. It's very similar. We were on the beach in Florida a few years ago doing an expedition and contact, and there was this being that came in. There was this shimmering, and this came in. And it was very, very small, almost like the Atacama humanoid, the little being that was in the Sirius film. Maybe less than 2 feet, 1.5 feet. And it's sort of, you see sort of vaguely an eye here in the torso. It's very etheric, and it looks like a halo. It's not, it's just an energy field. But you could actually sense and see it shimmering. And so we got a photo of it. And this is, be a beautiful cover for a book, wouldn't it? And maybe my next book I'm working on. Next. Go to the menu again. So other things that have happened are really quite interesting. I want to show Wichita Falls. This is an early event. A member of our team, we were out in Wichita Falls, Texas. This is 23 years ago. And this object just literally materializes in the sky. Now what's interesting, the French government sent me a fax of a drawing of exactly this object in France that was reported in 1968, I believe it was, late 60s. A very unusual object with these spikes and sort of an indented area here. And it was during a CE5 event, but this is broad daylight. So some other objects that appear will be fully materialized like that over or near a group. In Joshua Tree once, although the camera, we were in our meditation, the cameras didn't catch this, there was an object that materialized right over the east side of the field, floated over the circle and dematerialized. Made the weirdest noise I've ever heard. It did like that, like a didgeridoo almost. I mean, it was really strange, or Tibetan chanting. Maybe that's where they got the idea. Anyway, next. And a member of our team, similarly in Santa Fe, beautiful object, seamless, more traditional shaped disc with a little bit of a dome, estimated to 30, 50 feet in diameter here, and it's instamatic. Now, what's interesting about this, she was doing the CE5 protocols, felt, you know how you can feel someone looking at you? Felt there was an object there, didn't see it with the naked eye, took the picture up in the mountains outside Santa Fe. So a lot of this gets into some very unusual, where you really do use this ability to remote view. In other words, go into deep consciousness and see with your inner sight and mind and feel, which is, not accepted by a lot of scientists, but Dr. John at Princeton proved it's absolutely doable. Next. So I know we're going through these quickly. I just want to give you a sense of these. Let's see. Let's show this one, Corkscrew in Shasta. Now, Mount Shasta is a volcano on the border of... Oh my God! Now, watch this. This lifts up from the field in front of it. It is a light ship. Watch it, right here in the National Forest, while we're having an amazing contact event happen, and it moves so fast. It's at the edge of the crossing point of the speed of light. Great camera work. Here it is. Look at how it twists, turns, and then dematerializes there. We had several of these happen in Portugal, where they were right there, and that is one of the best videos of not a man-made, but an ET vehicle. And it's from a civilization that has always had a lot of activity around this volcanic area of Mount Shasta. Some believe it's the remnants of ETs that were here when Lemuria and Mu, the continent that allegedly existed in the Pacific Ocean, that sank. So I want to show this object. This is another fun event in Boca Grande. We went back, and we're in our group, and we're doing a very deep meditation. We feel this thing go right into the center of the circle, and this ribbon of light comes in. You see everyone, and goes up. Right, it wraps around this Peruvian doctor. She's a medical doctor. It was rather cold that night, so everyone's bundled up. And it comes in, wraps around her, and she was having like a samadhi experience. I was leading a meditation with a mantra and all of that. And she had this amazing experience. And luckily the camera caught it. This is a still photograph, very high quality Nikon camera. Yeah, next. It's very intimate, the kind of contact that happens. Everyone's looked at too many Hollywood movies. So this is a lot of fun. Here in the UK, we're here in 2010, and we were in what's called a crop circle. You may have heard of them. And we were doing a Sanskrit ceremony, a puja, and there's nobody with a blue light anywhere. We're in the center of this crop circle, and this really strange object comes in. Now, a very similar event just happened in Portugal, where we had done the Sanskrit ceremony and had been meditating, and there was an orange on the table that we'd put on the puja table. If you know what puja is, sort of a ceremony that is for developing meditation, higher consciousness. And the orange teleported off the table back to where it started from. We videotaped this by itself. And then when the orange was removed, it left like the Akashic record astral form of it. And that's in a photograph. This just happened a few days ago. Fascinating. So this is in a crop circle. And next. Let's see. Oh, I want to show, this is beautiful because we're up in, you know where Alton Barnes is, and we're up in Woodborough Hill, and we're meditating, and this object appears, and you see everyone turning around. It looks like the sun has come up, and this is in a still photograph, and people are turning, and it's your classic sort of spherical energy. Within this is an entire interstellar vehicle with a whole lot of ETs. Now, I wanted to show this, what's happened in France, this purple. This is very odd, because this actually was seen by about half the group, and very quickly, oh no, that's the wrong one. Transdimensional ET. This is another thing at Shasta. By the way, we have several hundred hours of this stuff. I'm trying to go to France here, 2010, purple field. So this is when the Admiral and all those folks were there. And we're gathering to do this puja, and this object, it looks like a big bubble smoke, and this is me pointing. And you see how I'm pointing, and everyone's turning around because an object had just gone very quickly. And this weird purpley mauve thing is there. Now, it's not quite fully materialized, but it's hovering above the ground just partially in this dimension. And the way it was first seen was almost like if you had a massive soap bubble that had all the colors in it, that just flashes in, flashes out. And people went, what was that? It was seen and felt by everyone looking that way. And this is fascinating. So next. So I wanted to show a few things over, where's the, let's do this, Outer Banks, North Carolina. So this will give you an idea of something that's pretty common. So we're on a national seashore, And there's a highway to the right. This is all sand dunes. This is the ocean here. There's a boat or something out here. And you watch what happens. You hear the noise in the background. That's one of these detectors picking up an anomaly, an electromagnetic field disturbance. And suddenly an object appears in the sky. That's a car on the road, Highway 12. And watch what happens. Beep, beep. Hear it? It lit up, it was orange. This is a night scope camera, 3rd generation. It lit up the ocean. It lit up the sky. The whole thing was this golden orange object that materialized. And then we felt all this intelligence in the circle. It's hard to explain. Very, very unusual and very intense. And then it vanishes. Doesn't move off. Watch. Folds back into space-time. So it emerges into this dimension and then disappears. You will see this. You go out and practice these photos. And watch this one. There. So this happened over and over. And there's another bizarre object. Watch this. And look at the turn it makes. This is not a satellite. Watch. Boom. Satellites don't do that. Not an aircraft. Boom. And then dematerializes. This is with a 3rd generation night scope. So these sort of things have happened thousands and thousands of times. And the phenomenon is interesting. What gets more interesting if you're able to go into non-locality of consciousness, remote view what they're doing, what they're saying, because then they're in the circle with you. Sometimes they fully materialize. Risky. They could get killed. But if I'm there. I mean, you know, the good news is when I'm there, I'm there. The bad news is that I'm there. Because there's no way, it's a liability, really. So this is wonderful. I want to show this. This is on our land in Colorado, Crestone, in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, and near the Great Sand Dunes. And what's this? Comes right up in front of us. We see it. And it's very similar to that light shift, very etheric, not quite materialized and metallic. It comes up and stops right here. This. So this is very routine, happens very often. It's great that it was actually captured on a camera. Then we'll go next. Oh, prohibited, let me see. Are these fun? You guys like these? Yeah? I want to point out this here in the UK. Yeah. So what was fun about this is that we were going on a daytime expedition, kind of looking around. We would go to crop circles during the day. This is my finger, and I felt this ET craft. Now, with the naked eye, you couldn't see. What's this? So this is me in a cap. Because of the sun, I was going to get burned. And my increasingly large forehead tends to get burned. So this is this object. But we could feel it. And so a guy with a very good Nikon camera, very fast speed, daytime, takes it, and this is there. So they're always around. But can you sense them? And then can you photograph them? Yeah, you can. But you got to be awake first. And I don't mean awake in your kind of the animal condition, but awake in this transcendent state. And before I was a medical doctor, I was a meditation teacher. Well, I don't know, a lot of people may not know that. So while most people were chasing skirts and dropping acid, I was spending 8 hours a day meditating and doing the Vedic cities. And so it helps to spend some time learning what consciousness is. So this is beautiful, beautiful object. So let's go to another one. And I want to, let's see. Let's show a few of these objects at Shasta so you kind of get an idea. Now when you go out and do this, always, always, always have a satellite chart and a satellite app. Because a lot of people go out, they'll see something that flares up. No, it's a U. I say it's not. It's an iridium satellite. 99% of the things you see moving up there at night are satellites. This was after there were no satellites. Look what it does. It's this large object. Now, it was a blue-white object, and there's an ET I call Kindness that was introduced to me the day that my assistant, Sherry Adamak, died. And she always comes, 3 times at least in Portugal last week. We had this object come in and do this. when there were no satellites. It was after any satellites were visible because of how late it was. And so these are very frequent. They happen usually nightly, but you've got to have a satellite chart, because if it depends on the time of year. In midsummer, you can have satellites all night, and you've got to be able to rule that out. This is another one, very late. We're up in Mount Shasta, a place called Sand Flats, so we're up at about 7,000 feet. Interestingly, it got down to like 22 degrees Fahrenheit, so below 0 centigrade. But it didn't matter. We still had a lot of beautiful things happen. So there's a whole series of these. We have actually hundreds and hundreds of hours of things that have done this, turned, curved, moved. One of the last nights in Portugal, we had an object where there were two objects linked together, moving across, and then it turned and curved over us. Here's another one. Look at the shape of it. It's like a teardrop or diamond object. Now, you can't tell the color of them with this. These are all night vision scopes. So everything looks kind of green with those. We're getting to have a camera now, the Sony A7, which I recommend, that's getting some fantastic images. But I just wanted to introduce these concepts to you. Oh, I want to show this one. And this will give you an idea. This will be the last one. And there are others, but we're going to run out of time. Boop. Oh, there we go. Because ultimately, people going out and making this happen on your own will create the morphogenic field, the sort of the shift in consciousness that then will make it more likely the governments of the world will finally get their heads out of the sand and do the right thing and just ignore the magic group. Look at this. Yep, that's like 10 feet in front of us we're doing. So an object comes and materializes and goes like a walnut shaped, and with a beam going up. Watch this. There's nobody out there. There's no special effects stuff. So very unusual phenomenon, all the way from materialized objects to light objects to something that's like a sphere that puts out a cone of light that has an interstellar ambassador in it. The whole range of things can happen. And in addition to that, all the electronic events. So we've had multiple events where, for example, at Mount Shasta, we had a tone come through the group. And it was, everyone heard it. It was an omnidirectional tone. And as it came through, everyone was in meditation. Everyone could see the spheres of a sphere, like a gunmetal gray to pearl white sphere, zip, 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 across the circle. But the sound created the form. Another very Vedic Sanskrit concept, name and form, because the tonality created was the carrier wave of the object. Too strange? Oh, it gets a lot stranger than this. I haven't talked about anything strange yet, but I wanted to give people an idea of the kind of phenomenon that happens. Okay, thank you. So we can have the lights up. I want to have some time for folks to ask some questions. Unfortunately, there's no mic in the room. You can put Bijou up behind me. It's kind of fun. The still one, the first one. And if you have a question, just sort of say it loudly enough so I can hear it, and then I will repeat it so everyone in the webinar and everyone can hear it. Yes, ma'am.
All of these people that are out there, these extraterrestrial beings, if they are such advanced technology, why can't they just come and do more than they do?
Yes, she's asking, with all the technology interstellar civilizations must have, why can't they just come and fix this mess? And I'm paraphrasing. Yes, they absolutely could. But would it be wise? No. Here's a sort of a prosaic and sort of example. How successful was our attempt to establish Jeffersonian democracy in Afghanistan after $1 trillion and hundreds of thousands of deaths? Not very. In other words, a civilization or culture has to evolve. And if a civilization that's a more advanced civilization were to try to impose something, it would be an unmitigated disaster and wouldn't be effective. Number two, if they were to do anything too overt, it will be used immediately by the intelligence community to say, we're being invaded. You look at what charlatans have done with disclosure project materials. I gathered together all these people at Strategic Air Command bases, all this stuff, where ET craft were outside the silos, took 16 to 20 intercontinental ballistic missiles, hydrogen bombs, offline. The captain and the other guys who were there said they felt the ETs were trying to say, please don't blow up this beautiful planet, but if you go to a full launch with the Soviet Union, we can stop it because life on this planet is precious. It's been turned into this thing of ETs have been here tampering with our national security and are a threat to our survival. Okay, so you can take the same data point and spin it. So if an interstellar civilization were to do anything too overt before we have educated each other and made sense out of this, it's going to get spun by the spinmeisters who have already primed the pump with Independence Day, the movie, video games, the whole abduction, mutilation cults, which, by the way, quick part of that story, man-made. I know the guys who are making the craft and the little grays and other creatures that look like aliens. Those are programmed life forms that are man-made. We've been making those for decades. You know about this? Yeah, absolutely, 100%. So, in fact, I have a Strategic Studies Institute document, SSI, uncontested, from the mid-90s, 96 I believe, that states about creating a global UFO abduction cult for the psychological warfare value of it, using advanced man-made objects and life forms. So the Stan Romanek tape that I've seen wasn't released because Disney bought it up and took it off the market. Disney's always been in the back pocket of CIA. Yeah, since World War II, by the way. Absolutely true. I have a document that proves it. It's a fascinating document. It talks about, a CIA document from the 50s talks about Disney Studios making cartoonish movies about this subject so it would be ridiculed and be a laughingstock. So Disney bought up this tape, but if you look at it, it's this kind of, it looks like a typical gray. It's walking very robotically. And the man who, where it appeared in his house, had someone in the intelligence community that I think used to work with his father in the Air Force say, it's one of the fake ones. But the UFO and MUFON investigators and this gentleman had no idea what a fake one was. I said, well, in the 80s there was research that came out that showed that there are these man-made military operated kind of androids that are nano-bio machines, so they have integrated circuits in their cerebral cortex. It's easy. You know, when Paris de Cuellar was kidnapped out of his limousine, UN Secretary General, in 1989, November, and they were planning, Gorbachev, Reagan, and Paris de Cuellar were planning to do a massive disclosure on the UFO subject. It got stopped. How did it get stopped? This rogue element within the intelligence community abducted him using those technology out of his limousine. Bud Hopkins thought it was aliens. Wasn't. I had a meeting with Prince Hans Adam von Liechtenstein, who explained all this to me. Now, he thought it was ET also. I said, no, it was alien, but not extraterrestrial. I use the word alien to connote the man-made scary stuff, because it's a xenophobic word, and the ones that are interstellar I call ET. There's a little play on words. Very important distinction, though. And so Paris de Cuellar was told that if they didn't stop the effort to disclose this subject to the world, everyone involved, including the President of the United States, would be abducted. That was Papa Bush at the time, not Reagan. I misspoke. Bush elder. And, quote, this blew up like an atomic bomb in the Bush White House. Now, Bush was a member of MAGIC, but MAGIC is not a monolith. There are these rogue elements who are doing this stuff. Very complicated. We could be here till tomorrow morning. I couldn't get through all the machinations of this dysfunctional group. So that's why they know that we have got to educate ourselves about this, begin to make contact, bring this out. Obviously, the technologies they possess, you know, it could be done, but what effect would it have? It has to come from inside out. If it's and you know, there's a wonderful book that was written not long ago, a mainstream business book, about the distinction between power and force. And it's inversely proportional. Force is 1/10 the effectiveness of genuine power. So if it's forced, it never works well. Haven't we learned that in the last decade in the Middle East? Yes, yes, sir.
Yeah. So do ET believe they have a God?
Are you speaking? I can't hear you.
Do ET believe they have a God?
Do ETs believe they have a God? Yes, I'm sure they understand that there's universal awareness, and they may not call it what we call it. But it would be more of a Jeffersonian concept of a supreme universal conscious being. Yes, and you have a question.
Yeah, Greenpeace is known worldwide.
I'm sorry, what's heard?
Greenpeace is
Uh-huh.
known worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
Do they have any interest in zero-point energy?
No. In fact, the head of Greenpeace for Australia was at this confab in Australia and was probably the most hostile person to me there. Because they think they know what the problem is and all the solutions. And so, interestingly, the hubris that goes with that. Now, there may be other people in Greenpeace who'd be interested. I haven't found any yet, but this person was incredibly hostile to the idea that there would be classified technologies that would be a solution instead of windmills and solar panels. So, no, he was absolutely, and even though we were showing dispositive evidence and documents to the effect, but no, he was very, very, very hostile. Now, I hope there are some Greenpeace people who would not be hostile. Yes, sir.
When you're meditating, how do you distinguish between what you're seeing is reality or just part of your imagination?
Yeah, well, this is a great question. When you're doing the meditation or remote viewing, how do you know the difference between something that's objectively real and your imagination? You don't unless there's some external confirmation. So something that happens that confirms it. So in other words, most of the important CE5 events, there have been remote views on our team or lucid dreams where it's actually been seen and happened in advance. Does that make sense? Where we've actually seen the event and they will actually go to that place. And then if it happens, then it's been confirmed. But many times you need some sort of external confirmation or objective confirmation. So it's just one tool that's used. And the only way to get good at that is to practice it. You know, your phone rings, don't look at it, get a feel and sense of who it is. The doorbell rings, don't run and open the door, try to sense. So if you practice meditation enough, you'll begin to be able to do this. In the emergency department, I was a trauma guy. You know, I'd have people come in, and like this one patient I had came in with the flu. But I looked at him as a young bloke like you, maybe 20s, and I looked at him and I said, oh my God, he's got a brain tumor. 2 boys, 2 kids with him. And of course I turned to the nurse, who was this wonderful hillbilly nurse in North Carolina, and I said, I need a stat CT of the head. And she said, Dr. Greer, he's only got the flu. I said, just do it. Luckily I didn't have to go through a bureaucrat or an insurance company or any other Nazis that run the healthcare system. Because in the emergency department you order it, it's done. So we go in there and he has this massive brain tumor that is an astrocytoma that's pushing his foramen magnum, the brainstem, down to the opening at the base of the skull, giving him the fever, the chills, the nausea, all simulating the flu. He had no other neurological findings, none. The neurosurgeon said, how did you even think to get this CAT scan? I said, oh, I just had a hunch. I couldn't tell him I had felt it and seen it. You know how they train golden retrievers to find cancers? Well, humans, I mean, I guess I'm like a big golden retriever, but I'm big and I'm furry. But that, it really is very effective. But you have to practice it and then get the objective feedback from reality. And otherwise, yeah, you just can stay in sort of something that can't be confirmed. I don't want to ignore this side of the group. Yes, sir, over there. The white shirt.
Yeah, you mentioned about the secret projects being illegal in the United States.
Yeah.
You've got a written constitution.
Yes.
In England, we have not got a written constitution.
Yes, but you still have laws.
Yeah.
And if the Minister of Defense, Lord Hill Norton, was telling the truth, and he was at the end of his life, there's no reason for him to lie, and I've met with many other people in your intelligence community and whatnot, who absolutely should have known, all right? And they're not informed. This is prima facie evidence of a project that is black, illegal, and etc. So whether it's unconstitutional or just flat out illegal, you can't be running amok if you're supposed to be in a representative democracy. I mean, that's something a totalitarian state can do. But you cannot do it in what's supposed to be a free society. So it's free or it isn't. I would represent to you on important things it isn't. And that's the problem. The people need to rise up, not violently, and change that on a lot of things. Including, you know, there's this myth that we have a free market. Well, how can we have a free market if every significant technology compartments and inform them of this fact and say, if you've been involved in these operations, you are not bound by the security oaths, because those security oaths are also written into law, but the law itself has been vitiated by the programs that are breaking the law. So this gets into basic contract law. Let's say that this gentleman is a head of the mafia. I know you're not. And I enter into a contract with him. If he's running an illegal operation, that contract is vitiated. There's no enforceability. This is basic law in any country that has laws. Therefore, since that group is illegal, and this is what I'm calling for a mass defection from inside these operations. There's another whole wave of disclosure, in other words, of mass defections, because it's too late for us to do it piecemeal. And they need to understand, if they do it, they need to listen to every word I've shared, and I will come to their aid, as I tried to Gary McKinnon, who hacked into the Pentagon. Because while the act was illegal, the hacking, what he was accessing were projects in and of themselves that were illegal projects. And since they were illegal projects, they weren't covered by the law, including the hacking laws. So as I said, his attorney had it all upside down in how he argued that case. It would have been point set match if they'd said, here's our argument, it's a constitutional argument, and I would have given a list of people who could be subpoenaed. And these are, you get the drift of some of the folks. And that's why, and there are a lot of people who are victims of this secrecy. Everyone has these conspiracy theories. You have Prince Charles here, very interested, and his father, Philip, very interested in this subject. And both of them subscribed for years to Flying Salsa Review that Gordon Crichton published, who was a military intelligence officer. And I know folks who are friends with Charles and have always asked for the briefings, like the presidential briefings I put together will go to these folks and they'll take it to Prince Charles. But they are wanting to know because they're pretty much victims of the secrecy too. So a lot of people think there is a grand conspiracy, but it's not what most people think. And so you have victims, whether it's in royal families, in your military, in your intelligence, in your parliament, and in your 10 Downing Street over here. So yeah.
Talking about free energy, I heard that the Keshe Foundation, if I'm not wrong, is releasing a 0-point device that can power up your house now, like in September, October this year. So I don't know how true this is.
Well, there are people, he's asking the question about these 0-point and so-called free energy. It's kind of a misnomer. None of them violate the laws of thermodynamics. You have to understand that it was proven decades ago by Dr. Casimir that there is a 0-point field, and it's estimated that a cubic centimeter of space, not outer space, but space in this room, has enough energy to run the United States for a week. Maybe a year, but a long time, and a huge amount of power density. So that's been proven scientifically in mainstream physics journals. The question is, can it be accessed? The answer is yes. Now, there are all kinds of things on the internet about so-and-so has one, and my group, the Serious Technology Advanced Research, which is now the umbrella for the Orion Project, which does the energy research, CSETI, the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, and the Disclosure Project, has a $100,000 award to anyone who can actually deliver something like that we can then release open source. Cannot be patented, cannot have a trade secret, must be fully reproducible, and it would be released massively. And when I say massively, 800 million people saw the National Press Club disclosure event globally. This would be 3 times that. I guarantee it. But so far no one's come to us with something that meets the criteria, can be independently reproduced and tested, proven, only from plans. It has no secrets. Like Rossi has this thing, you all know, in Italy, National Security Agency contacts I have said they're very interested in it because they think it's real. The problem is he's keeping it a trade secret. It's going to be like Stan Meyer's water fuel car. It's going to go to the grave with him if he doesn't change his strategy. I'm making a prediction here. Anyone who tries to keep something like this and purely for monetizing it and for a trade secret and patent, it's not like inventing an iPhone, a piece of junk. I'm saying, sorry, Apple. It's junk. It's made in a slave factory in China. $54 for something you pay £800 for, or $800 for. In reality, all that is very ordinary technology. You come up with something like this that's going to change the macroeconomic system. you really change something then. And so it can't be done in a conventional technology rollout. It has got to be open source, put out to the public. Now, this is very hard for inventors to hear because they may have put a lot of work into it, and they say, well, how can then I be compensated? Believe me, how many brands of Kleenex are there? Or Coca-Colas? Or Xerox machines? Well, there's a zillion copier machines now. There could still be a way, and just like is it Linux or the operating system, there are ways to do it, and there could still be a way to monetize it. But if you go to patent route, it's going to be seized. If you go the trade secrecy route, it will not be able to be replicated quickly enough before it gets hoovered up, vacuumed up by the intelligence community and squashed. And if or worse, which of course there have been a number. We had a guy under contract in 2010 to build one of these over Unity free energy systems, and he had been cleared by the intelligence community to do it. 5 of the shepherds, so-called shepherds in the intelligence community that were holding his security clearance, that says, yes, you can do this for Dr. Greer and the Orion project. We gave him the grant. About the time he was assembling the thing together, he got visited by a former CIA director, the one I had briefed, R. James Woolsey, and a bunch of henchmen who threatened him and his wife and his family and shut it down. So he had our funds, and we got no system. This is why we're not going to do that. It has to come to us and be completely operational and reproducible. In other words, if you leave out the secret ingredient of how it works, which if you look at Stan Meyer's patents on the fuel energy water car, none of them are accurate. The voltages and the hertz, cycles per second, are all incorrect. He deliberately left out the magic of how it works, which of course vitiates the patent, but also means he took it to his grave. Except his twin brother Steve, who we met with, understands it, but he's afraid of being assassinated. Therefore, we either have to get people to fund an energy lab, because we really do understand how these systems work, but I'm not a mechanical or electrical engineer. And I think probably, I have a disk with several thousand patents that the CIA seized on a disk. We have it. But, it's two-dimensional. To build it up is a research project. But it's in our vault. We have it. Anyone want to fund a lab? We've got $10 million extra laying around to open a research lab. Let's do it. I don't have that kind of money, but some people might, so it can be done. Or someone who, like these groups, have to bring something to us that we can then move across the goal line. If it's handled in any other way, it can't, most of these end up being black boxes, these technology. And when you try to drill down on what is it actually doing, how is it working, oh, I can't tell you that. All right, and in which case it's either a fraud or they're strategically immature and they're going to go down. It ain't going to happen. So our strategy is to get something that is legitimate, can be scientifically tested, reproduced independently by multiple people, and once we know it's legitimate, boom, it's pushed out over the internet. If we had our own laboratory funded, everything in that lab would be streamed in real time on the internet. That's what we would do. And people want to come in and shut that down, oh, your own candid camera. Very, very big mistake. One more question, and then we're going to go and just hang out together a little bit. Let's see, back here in the blue shirt, gentleman.
Do you believe that there is a secret space program currently in operation? And do you have any particular thoughts on the whistleblower Corey Good, who's been talking recently with David Wilcox about the secret space program?
Okay, in general, I don't talk about other people, but I will talk about ideas. It's just ethically I don't do it. I think it's important to understand that there is a secret space program. By the time we landed on the moon with my uncle's lunar module, they already had 15 years earlier anti-gravs that were flying around. Now, that is true. But then what happens is there are people who say, oh yeah, and I've been to this star system and back, and those are great claims, prove it. So I need to either have multiple independent corroborating individuals and documents and et cetera for me to buy that. My understanding is that there are, in fact, a secret space force, but it doesn't go too far out there because the interstellar civilizations don't want it. In fact, I had a meeting not long ago, a couple years ago, with this senior Naval Research Lab scientist who had come out of a briefing with a general at the Defense Intelligence Agency that had just been shown images of a massive interstellar craft out around near the rings of Saturn. And it was interesting, he didn't know that one of the executives at Lockheed Martin that was running the Cassini probe had called me to give me the same information. And apparently this space center is in the order of dozens to hundreds of miles in diameter. My military advisor for many years was at NORAD, North American Air Defense Command, and was in a Console 50, is what it was called back then, that tracked the interstellars and interplanetaries. And he said that at that time, back in the 70s, that they had tracked an object out in deep space that, in our solar system though, that was 26 miles in diameter. I mean, that's like the whole diameter across the city of London. Floating out there. And he said, he's a Navy guy, he said, floating under its own steam, moving under its own steam. I said, I don't think they're using steam, but Navy guy, you know, he's thinking steam. But, so yes, that part, you know, so there are interstellar objects out there, and there are man-made electromagnetogravitics that can go a certain point. But my understanding is that we're not allowed to just go way out there. And the reason for it is that we're not considered civilized yet. If you doubt it, come to an emergency department with me in America on any Saturday night or whatever. I mean, it's not hard to figure out that until humans begin to live at a level 1 civilization that Michikaku calls a level 1, we're simply not going to be allowed to go very far out there. So I'm skeptical of some of the claims. So yes, we have a secret Air Force and a secret Space Force, but I think sometimes the stories get a little bit embellished and get too far out. Well, look, I would love to thank all of you guys for being here. You're a wonderful group. It's a little after 9. We have to be completely cleared out of the building by 10. So we're going to go to this other place. If you want to hang out a little bit, I can sign some books if you brought one. But we need to start moving in that direction. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.